Humans are beautiful, they're gorgeous. The most foundational element of humanity is to care for others and be cared for ourselves. And yet these unpaid caregivers, they're not paying attention to themselves at all. And 70% have at least one mental health condition. 52% of sandwich generation caregivers have actively thought about suicide in the last 30 days. These are horrifying numbers. The caregivers will never ask for help because they're not worried about them. They're totally other focused in a beautiful way.
Welcome to The Other 80. I'm Claudia Williams. There's a stat you probably don't know. An astounding 43% of adults in this country have a job that pays them $0 and they didn't apply for. Caregiving. It requires a dizzying array of skills and gets almost no support. And yet, we rarely talk about it. That's a conversation Alex Drane is hoping to spark through her latest venture, ARCHANGELS. She wants to bring these quiet, everyday acts of care into the spotlight. This conversation with Alex is the last in a series that I had at the latest health conference in Las Vegas. You can hear the noise and hubbub and even sometimes music behind our conversation. This one is short, but it's packed with content. Alex and I talk about the unseen toll of unpaid caregiving, her experience founding Eliza, Engage with Grace, and ARCHANGELS, and we even touch on sex and death, two other invisible and unfortunately taboo topics. So please welcome Alexandra Drane to The Other 80.
Really, there's so much to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on from your perspective. What's important to know about you?
She's a hot mess.
Oh,
No, genuinely, she's out of control all the time. And only, though, because she cares so fiercely about what she's doing, which is trying to reframe how the entire world thinks about and supports and creates upward mobility for the 43% of adults who are unpaid caregivers. That's my thing.
I would have added sexy, dynamic, kind, warm, and human.
Oh, thanks.
But let's talk more about that.
That's very kind. Thank you.
You sent me a note with 3 words. I said, what do you want to talk about, Al? And you said, caregiving, caregiving, caregiving. Yeah.
I said something else, too.
We'll get to sex also.
And death.
And death.
Yeah, my 2 favorite topics besides caregiving. Caregiving and sex and
they're
death. They're kind of related.
Yeah.
Because when you're caregiving, you get no booty. And you're often caring for someone in an advanced illness situation, which is so hard. But it reminds you to stay present in this moment, right now.
When I look at your trajectory through this life, you've started a lot of things. At least I see a common thread around helping people build health where they are versus trying to imagine a fictitious world where people can comply with all the things we want them to do. And I wonder if you see other threads as you look across your career and the things you've started.
I think that I would say a couple things. One is lots of mistakes and failure. And as a bootstrapper, I think that's the most important thing. And I was chatting with someone last night. I feel as though when something goes right, the conditions that make something work are so unusual. And you don't learn a lot from just trying to do that thing again. In fact, it won't work usually again. But when something goes wrong, there's a lesson in it, and you can at least not do that again. And so if I look at everything I've done, it's always been because something that I thought would work did not. And as a, grit and grind, rabble-rousing, bootstrapping entrepreneur, something not working is not an option. So you just have to try again. And so I love that aspect of it. And we say at our team all the time, like, wow, that failed, and we thought it was genius. Let's take a moment and feel sucky about it, and then we're going to move on. And then we move on. And so I think that's how come everything I'm lucky enough to get to do, we move so fast because we get immediate feedback. There's no distance between us and the outside world, which gets to finding people where they are. And if you are out with the people, shoulder to shoulder with real humans, doing something that you think is fantastic, and they're like, that's dumb, it's hard to be in your Eiffel Tower, your ivory tower, whatever it's called, feeling good about yourself when people are looking at you and being like, no, I would never, ever, ever do that.
I was watching a toddler learn to walk, What is noticeable is the lack of frustration on their faces when they fall down. Maybe if they get hurt, yes, but generally it's fall down, sometimes laugh, maybe cry. But there's not that layer of dashed expectations or shame. That's the other thing that I think often enters into our psyches when we fail at something.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how in your experience to cultivate that feeling of just learning and try to at least notice the shame and ask it to go away when we have those lessons of failure.
I'm trying to be like very zen and like thank those terrible, horrible feelings that come into all of our heads all the time. I find environments like this here so intimidating. I go through 3 stages every time I come to a big event. The first is, oh my God, I'm terrified. I don't belong. The second is everybody's really successful and I'm just a tremendous loser. And the third is none of that matters. The only thing that matters is A, you could be dead tomorrow and you're not. What a gift. B, you believe in what you're doing, right? And C, if you put your all into something authentically, that's all you can do. It's literally all you can do is just be present, be intentional, be kind, be fierce about things that matter, have integrity. And that's all you can do. And so I work myself back into it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. So, yes, no, I'm a mess. Again, like you could just tell me, well, this is a mess.
And the gift I think you've given to all of our listeners is to know that someone as celebrated and amazing who was on the main stage yesterday with the CEO of Kaiser Permanente also feels that way.
Oh, I was literally walking onto that stage. I had sweat dripping down my back. And Greg was walking in front of me, and I talked to myself. I literally was like, it is okay because you love Greg and you want him to shine the way that you know he does. And you just need to let everything else go and just fiercely love on that man and what he's doing and how fiercely he loves on the people that he serves. But I was like, I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out. They say that you have a lizard brain in your forebrain, right? In your lizard brain, that's why they tell toddlers, let's continue with that analogy, to use your words. Because in your lizard brain, you haven't activated your forebrain. This could be totally wrong, but someone told it to me and I love it. And so if you say something out loud, it activates the forebrain, which gets you out of, dinosaur or bear attack mode and lets you start applying rations. So I was literally whispering to myself as I was walking out. I was whispering those words.
And it showed. It showed in your conversation. Okay, let's talk about caregiving. And I love the phrase I think you had maybe in your bio that phrased your mission as lifting up and changing the world for the 43% of our country that are adult caregivers. So what pulled you to that mission?
It's funny because I love your questions always. And it gets back to when you asked me about my ARC, right? Which is, and failure being a part of it. So every company that I started was a layer of skin. And then in that company, when we had done our best to solve it or something had failed, a layer of skin came off and we kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And if we just go back to Eliza, we originally thought what we were going to do was use our patented outbound speech recognition technology to reach out to the 85% of people who aren't coming into the healthcare system and to help them get preventive screenings, do the things that they should. And we learned very quickly that for the vast majority of those folks, when you were actually interacting with them, it wasn't that they didn't know to get their mammogram or didn't want to get their colon cancer screening. In the end, it was because their mother with Alzheimer's had just moved in. They hated their boss so much they couldn't breathe. They thought they were going to lose their job. One of their kids had just had a mental breakdown. They were going through a divorce, whatever it might be. And we literally put a billion pieces of data behind what we call the unmentionables, which was this idea you have to expand the definition of health to include life, because when life goes wrong, health goes wrong. And that the biggest conditions in the US were caregiver stress, financial stress, relationship stress, and workplace stress. And you remember in parallel, back in 2008, we had launched Engage with Grace, which was a movement about how to have the conversation about how to live your best days until your last. Thank you, Atul Gawande, for coining that phrase. Way before you need to. Start them as soon as you can and make them beautiful conversations. We were part of the founding team of Death Over Dinner, right? Like, pour some wine, talk about this. Because if you get into the groove of knowing how to talk about it, then when you need to talk about it, you're ready to talk about it. And this came from a personal experience. We hadn't done that. So when I left Eliza and Sarah, my co-founder in ARCHANGELS, the natural overlap between those two things was caregiving. If you are a caregiver, you will have financial stress, you will have relationship stress, you will have workplace stress. So it's just like peeling off that next layer of skin. And we always think about it as, what can you not do? And both of us felt strongly, and Erin, our other co-founder, felt very strongly, this is something we can't not do. Humans are beautiful, they're gorgeous. The most foundational element of humanity is to care for others and be cared for ourselves. And yet these unpaid caregivers, they're not paying attention to themselves at all. And 70% have at least one mental health condition. 52% of sandwich generation caregivers have actively thought about suicide in the last 30 days. These are horrifying numbers. The caregivers will never ask for help because they're not worried about them, right? They're totally other focused in a beautiful kind of way.
Yesterday on stage, you gave Greg something and also announced a new chapter of work in this area. Do you want to talk about the bag?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I actually
have one?
I can get them out of my pocket. Yeah.
It's a challenge coin.
Yeah.
What are challenge coins for those that don't know?
Challenge coins for those that don't know, and you can feel it. I mean, there's a significance. And if you're in the military or it's evolved to really lots of different kinds of service, it is about recognizing and honoring an act of service. And a very dear friend, we were talking about this, I had traveled around with him a lot, and he was always, getting or giving challenge coins. So it became a way to sort of lift up and celebrate and acknowledge the incredible skills that are developed by these individuals to support people in getting more skills where they need to, and as importantly, to create upward mobility. So it's like to honor and help that person get through that moment. And then it's to say to all the workers out there, the employers, listen, we live in a care economy, and these individuals, they know how to care. What you should be doing is hiring someone who's been an unpaid caregiver as fast as you freaking can, because whatever industry you're in, they're going to be the folks who will be the most front and center, who will work to solve problems with you. They are indomitable in spirit. It's a way of framing that and letting somebody stick the virtual badge anywhere they freaking want. LinkedIn, resume, print it out for your fridge, whatever, obviously social the heck out of it. And it's free. And the resources it points you to are free.
One of the things you said on stage yesterday really struck me, and that was to lift up the strength and the learning and the wisdom and the caring of this role that is often thrust upon us. There's always a choice, of course, in anything we do, but often these are not choices that are architected. These are choices that are thrust on us because we love people. I think that's a really important distinction and creates a very different platform for policy change and employer support change and all of those things.
Yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts on that. If you look at this, right, it says integrity, strength, and devotion. And at first, we just had integrity and devotion. And one of our faith-based leaders that we love, said, when you only have integrity and devotion, I don't always feel devoted. He said, sometimes I am mad as heck, and I don't want this role. I remember with another woman hearing her story about how her dad was incarcerated and had really been hard on her. And he was in an end-of-life situation in prison. They sent him home because he was dying to her because there was no one else. So no, it doesn't always come wrapped in a package that you want it to. And that's why we added the word strength, right? Because sometimes it's strength of character, it's strength of will, it's strength of grit and grind. You just got to get through it. I'm going to use hospital at home as an example.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah, because
I have mixed feelings about it.
One of my favorite phrases is chase the dollar to the ground, right? Because we live in these silos within healthcare, within industries. But if you actually cross those silos, because humans don't live in silos, and you chase the dollar to the ground, there is a cost. There is a ripple effect. There's also a beautiful benefit. So if you take hospital at home, here's the hospital. And they're like, oh, Alex, your dad had surgery. You know what? In the olden days, he'd have to stay here for 7 days. But if we got a deal for you, we're going to get your daddy out of here in 2. And they say that to my dad directly, right? This is not an exact example, but work with me. Hey, Mr. Drane, WD, do you want to go home? What's my dad going to say? Yes. I'm at the foot of the bed, right? I can't be like, listen, I can't take my dad because I've got a full-time job and kids and all this stuff. So my dad's coming home with me. So then in that situation, the hospital's going to say, and we have this fantastic program, and 3 times a day, a nurse is going to come and check on your dad. 3 freaking times a day. With the employment the way it is right now, often they don't come 3 times a day. I'm sorry to say it, but if you look at the data, they don't. Gorgeous places like Medically Home, I love you, Pippa Shulman, they do, but some of them don't. And now I'm not in work for those 5 days. And that's a very real cost, right? And the impact for my children and the impact on other things. So if I can do it, you bet I want to bring my dad home. Of course I do. So one of the things that we worked out with Becky Prevey was this idea of a checklist. And before you send somebody home from the hospital, before you even sit and ask my dad, just like when I was having babies, each time they pulled me aside and someone said to me in a closed room, Alex, are you safe at home? They didn't ask me in front of my man, are you safe at home? Because I couldn't answer, honestly. I want you to pull me into a separate room and I want you to tell me what caring for my dad is going to be like. Alex, he's going to be up every night. You're going to need to check this. You're going to be tired. It's going to be scary. But we're going to support you in the following ways. Do you feel comfortable doing it? And if I say yes, awesome, then that's great. And if I say no, then you have to respect that. And the last point I'll make on this topic is, by the way, if you do send my dad home in 2 days, not 7, there's money that's getting saved by someone. Give me some of that money.
We're in election season, and regardless of who wins, I hope that this is on the agenda in the next administration. What would you want to be the agenda for caregiving in the next administration?
First and foremost, just the fact that people are talking about it begins to change the world. Just the fact that it is beginning to become something that is discussed, because smart people are saying, wait a minute, 43% of the population is in this role, right? And that's the ARCHANGELS data from the COPE initiative published with the CDC. But RAND, in full disclosure, I am on their Social Economic Policy Advisory Board, but they just published a study that said it's 40.5%. There's 2 massive data points, right? Very validated sources saying it's over 40%. So the fact that it is getting on an agenda is important. And I hope that there begin to be things like recognition of payment structures. We're seeing it happen with CMS and Medicare, where we're paying providers and people are falling out of woodwork to come start tapping into that money stream. That's fantastic. Thank you, Medicare, for changing that. But I would love to see more expanded financial support, whether it's tax breaks or literally frickin' put dollars in the hands of people. And so when you get a policy that you believe is really supporting caregivers, sign me the frick up.
I wish I had not checked the time, but the time says that our time is over.
We didn't get a sex and death.
I know. So quickly, sex and death.
Yes.
I'm going to actually tell you a 10-second story. I'm my dad's medical power of attorney, and I said, Dad, I really want to talk to you about what life looks like at the end, and I'd like you to fill out a pulse form. And I was definitely sensing he was not comfortable talking about it. A month later, he came back to me with this beautiful form that asked questions like, what music do you want playing? What does a beautiful death look like? Who do you want in the room? How do you want to feel as you're dying? What memories do you want to think about? And he said, honey, for me, it wasn't about the medical care. That was a piece of it. I really wanted to use this as a time to talk to you about these deeper things I want as I die. And it was incredibly beautiful. You were the one that inspired that conversation.
So glad. One of the things I think about all the time is the term, don't save eulogies for eulogies. And I've been with a lot of people in their final days. And one of the most beautiful things you can do is know the answers to those questions. Things as straightforward as, do you want me to touch you or not? Do you want me to lie in bed with you or not? What music do you want to listen to? Do you like candles? Do you not like candles? I was just spent a lot of time with a very, very dear friend who I hadn't spent a lot of time with in a while. And just had a lot of people send me notes. And what I did, even as he passed into the coma stage, I just read him the notes that people had sent about him and what they meant to him. And his family was in the room too, and these were all work notes, work friends. They didn't know a lot of these stories. And so it was just an extraordinary gift to the family, to me, and I hope somewhere inside to him. Let's know those things early, let's talk about them often. And then the last thing, know your intensity. Get your intensity score. It takes 2 minutes. If you go to archangels.me and just get your score and get your freaking badge and stick it everywhere you possibly can, thecarebadge.com. It is free. The resources are free. Getting your score is free. and then pass it on. And most importantly, unpaid caregivers are drowning, right? Don't wait for them to ask for help. They're not gonna find them and you throw them a life ring. And don't say, how can I help you? Because they're too tired and overwhelmed. Just frickin' help. Fill their fridge, mow their lawn, sit with their mom, whatever it takes.
I love you. Thank you.
I love you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, guys.
I think we all know by now that what's broken in healthcare often falls squarely on the shoulders of patients. But what's become really clear to me now is that what's broken in society falls on caregivers. When someone we love is hurting, physically, mentally, or emotionally, of course we step up. We show up with meals, we shuttle them to medical appointments, we sit by their sides through the longest nights of their lives. But what happens when that caregiver starts to crumble and crack under the sheer weight of that responsibility? Too often they are left to carry the weight alone, and all too often they feel invisible while doing it. But let's imagine for a minute a society where those caregivers aren't left to carry that burden in silence. A society that sees them and surrounds them with love, support, and community without being asked. This podcast was created by me, Claudia Williams. My podcast producer is Avery Moore-Kloss. Check out the show notes for more information on Alexandra Drane and her work with ARCHANGELS. There is more information on my background, this podcast, and our guests on our website, www.theother80.com. Until next time, I'm Claudia Williams.